Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the human flagship Constitution and watched 2,000 alien warships approach the edge of human space. The Calarian fleet was impressive by any measure, with massive dreadnoughts that could destroy entire cities and smaller attack ships that moved like schools of deadly fish through the darkness. Kate had spent months preparing for this moment, but she still felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Kate was not a typical military officer by old Earth standards. She had grown up in California and studied both engineering and military strategy before joining the Space Force. What made her unusual was her ability to think about warfare in ways that no one had ever considered before. While other officers learned tactics and strategies from history books, Kate approached battle like a puzzle that could be solved with creativity and physics. Standing beside her was Chief Tactical Officer Ryan Woods, a young man from Texas who had the kind of mind that could see possibilities where others saw only problems. Ryan had been working with human scientists for months to develop new approaches to space combat. Approaches that took advantage of humanity's growing understanding of how to manipulate the basic forces of the universe. "Admiral," Ryan said quietly, "the Calarian fleet has crossed into our territory. They're demanding that we surrender and submit to Council authority." Kate nodded. She had expected this. The hegemony of Kalar had been making threats for months, claiming that human technology was dangerous and needed to be controlled by the galactic community. Their ambassador had sent message after message demanding that humans accept Council oversight and agree to limitations on their technological development. The human government had tried diplomacy first. Ambassador Lisa Carter had spent weeks in negotiations explaining that humans had no hostile intentions and were simply trying to build a better life for their people. She had offered to share some technologies that could benefit the entire galaxy, but only if humans were allowed to maintain their independence. The Calarians had rejected every offer. Their leaders believed that any species capable of manipulating fundamental physics was too dangerous to exist without strict oversight. They had decided that if humans would not accept voluntary restrictions, then restrictions would be imposed by force. "Open a channel to the Calarian flagship," Kate ordered. Admiral Thekmore appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features twisted with confidence and aggression. He was wearing the ceremonial armor of the Calarian military, covered in symbols that represented his many victories over lesser species. "Human Admiral," Thekmore said, "I am here to enforce the will of the Galactic Council. Your species has developed technology that violates the established order of civilized space. You will surrender immediately and submit to Council authority, or you will be destroyed." Kate looked at the alien commander with calm eyes. "Admiral Thekmore, I appreciate your position, but humans have committed no crimes against galactic law. We have not attacked anyone or threatened any peaceful species. We simply want to be left alone to develop our civilization in our own way." Thekmore's laugh was harsh and mocking. "Your 40 ships against my 2,000? Even if your technology is advanced, you cannot possibly believe you can win this battle. Surrender now, and your people will be treated with mercy." "I'm sorry," Kate said, "but surrender is not an option." The channel closed, and Kate turned to Ryan. "Are our people ready?" "Yes, Admiral. All ships are in position, and all systems are active." Kate nodded and spoke into her communications device. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. Execute Protocol 7. What happened next had never been seen before in galactic history. The human ships, which had seemed small and insignificant compared to the massive Calarian dreadnoughts, suddenly became something entirely different. Space itself began to bend and twist around them, creating fields of distorted reality that made normal physics stop working. Engineer Paula Kim, working from the Constitution's Modified Engineering section, activated systems that her team had been developing for months. Paula was a quiet woman from Seattle who had always been fascinated by the idea that the universe was not as fixed and unchangeable as people believed. Her work had proven that with the right approach, even the most fundamental laws of nature could be convinced to work differently. Protocol 7 is active, Paula reported. All ships are now operating in modified reality fields. The first Calarian attack came exactly as Kate had expected. Thousands of energy weapons fired at the human fleet, beams of destructive force that should have vaporized the smaller human ships instantly. Instead, something impossible happened. The energy beams simply passed through the human ships as if they were not really there. "What is happening?" demanded Admiral Thekmore from his flagship. "Why are our weapons not hitting their targets?" His science officer, a nervous Calarian named Velkos, checked his instruments frantically. "Sir, our weapons are firing correctly, but the space around the human ships is not behaving normally. The energy beams are being redirected through dimensions that should not exist." The human counterattack began a moment later. The Constitution fired a single projectile at the nearest Calarian dreadnought, a simple piece of metal that should have bounced harmlessly off the enemy ship's powerful shields. Instead, the projectile passed through the shields as if they were made of air and struck the hull of the dreadnought. The Calarian ship did not explode. It simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, a massive warship with thousands of crew members, and the next moment there was empty space where it had been. "How is this possible?" Thekmore screamed at his science officer. "Admiral," Velkos said, his voice shaking with fear, "the human projectile was not just a piece of metal. It was carrying some kind of field that convinced the local area of space that our ship was never supposed to exist in the first place. Our ship did not get destroyed. It got edited out of reality." The battle continued for 4 days, but it was not really a battle in any traditional sense. The Calarian fleet attacked with everything they had: energy weapons, missiles, kinetic projectiles, even attempts to ram the human ships directly. Nothing worked. The human ships existed in pockets of modified space where the normal rules did not apply. Meanwhile, the human counterattacks were devastating in ways that no military doctrine had ever contemplated. Chief Tactical Officer Ryan Woods had weaponized creativity itself. Human ships did not just defend themselves, they convinced local gravity fields to become hostile to enemy vessels. They launched weapons that made enemy armor forget how to be solid. They created areas of space where the Calarian ship's own engines worked against them. The most terrifying moment came on the 3rd day when Ryan activated something he called artillery gravity. The Constitution created a localized gravitational anomaly that reached across thousands of kilometers of space and crushed a dozen Calarian ships simultaneously. The ships were not destroyed by weapons. They were destroyed by space itself. Admiral Thekmore's final transmission was broadcast across the entire galaxy. His voice was broken and filled with a fear that no Calarian warrior had ever expressed before. "They have made gravity into artillery," he screamed. "They turned our own weapons against us without touching them. How do you fight a species that turns natural laws into weapons? How do you fight beings who can make reality itself choose sides?" The few surviving Calarian ships fled human space, carrying reports that the Galactic Council initially refused to believe. The war crimes tribunal that followed became a mockery when the investigating committee realized that humans had not actually broken any known laws of warfare. No galactic law prohibited the use of modified physics or tactical reality manipulation because no one had ever imagined that such things were possible. The final vote of the Galactic Council was unanimous: complete quarantine of human space, with the official reason listed as protective isolation pending advanced capability assessment. But everyone who had access to the classified reports knew the real reason. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was not trying to protect the galaxy from a dangerous species. They were trying to protect the galaxy from a species that was so far beyond everyone else that contact with them might fundamentally change what it meant to exist in the universe. The quarantine buoys that went up around human space carried a simple message in every known language: this is the edge of human space. Turn back now. This is your only warning. What the galaxy did not know was that the quarantine had never been about keeping humans in. It had always been about keeping everyone else out until they were ready for what humans had become. Navigator Third Class Kesani could not stop thinking about the warning buoy they had encountered 3 days ago. Captain Vexitar had ordered the Cosmic Dawn to retreat from human space immediately, but something about the entire situation bothered her. She was young and curious, and the idea that there was a part of the galaxy that was completely forbidden made her want to understand why. During her off-duty hours, Kesani had been researching everything she could find about the area known as human space. The official records were limited and heavily classified, but she had found some older reports that painted a picture of something that did not make sense. According to the files, humans had been quiet for almost 50 years since the war with the Calarian hegemony. No human ships had been detected outside their territory, no communications had been intercepted, and no expansion activity had been observed. The problem was that this silence was unnatural for any spacefaring species. Every other civilization in the galaxy continued to grow and explore and develop new technology. Even species that were peaceful and defensive still sent out trade missions and exploration vessels. The complete absence of any human activity suggested either that the species had died out or that they were hiding something very important. Kesani brought her concerns to Chief Science Officer Velnoth during their next duty shift. Velnoth was older and more experienced, and she hoped he might have access to information that was not available to junior officers. "Sir," she said, "I've been reviewing the data about human space, and something doesn't make sense. If humans are as advanced as the old reports suggest, why haven't we detected any activity from them in 50 years? Velnoth looked at her with the expression of someone who had been hoping that a particular question would never be asked. "Kesani, there are some things that junior officers are not supposed to think about too carefully. The human situation is one of those things. But, sir, if they've been completely quiet for 50 years, maybe they're not a threat anymore. Maybe the quarantine is unnecessary. Or maybe," Velnoth said quietly, "they've been using those 50 years to become something even more dangerous than they were before." Their conversation was interrupted when the ship's sensors detected something unusual. The Cosmic Dawn was still several light years away from human space, but they were picking up readings that suggested artificial activity in an area where no activity should exist. Captain Vexitar arrived on the bridge quickly when the alert was sounded. "What do we have?" he asked. "Sir," Kesani reported, "we're detecting what appear to be artificial structures near the outer edge of human territory. They're not on any of our charts, and they're much larger than the warning buoys we encountered before." The main screen showed a cluster of objects that looked like nothing any of them had ever seen. They were geometric shapes that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, creating visual effects that hurt to look at directly. Some parts of the structures appeared solid, while other parts seemed to fade in and out of existence. "They're defense platforms," Velnoth said after studying the readings. "But they're unlike anything in our databases. The energy signatures suggest technology that operates on principles we don't understand." Captain Vextar stared at the strange objects on the screen. "How many are there?" "Sensors show at least 100 platforms spread throughout this region," Kesani reported. "And Captain, there's something else. The platforms appear to be scanning us." "What do you mean?" "Every time our sensors probe one of the platforms, it responds by directing some kind of scanning beam back at our ship. It's like they're studying us while we're studying them." This news made everyone on the bridge nervous. Being scanned by unknown technology was dangerous enough, but the fact that the platforms were actively responding to their presence suggested that humans were aware of their investigation. Velnoth worked at his science station for several minutes before making an announcement that chilled everyone on the bridge. "Captain, these platforms are not just defending human space. They're learning from every contact with galactic ships. Each scan, each approach by our vessels is being analyzed and stored in some kind of database." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for 50 years, every time a galactic ship has come near human space, these platforms have been recording everything about our technology, our tactics, and our capabilities. The humans haven't been hiding. They've been studying us." The implications of this discovery were terrifying. If humans had been monitoring galactic civilization for 50 years, they would know everything about the military capabilities, technological limitations, and political structures of every major species. While the galaxy had assumed that humans were isolated and possibly declining, they had actually been gathering intelligence on everyone else. The situation became worse when Velnoth managed to intercept a transmission from deep inside human space. The signal was heavily encrypted, but their computer systems were able to decode part of it. What they heard made the entire crew wish they had never come to this region of space. The transmission was a conversation between 2 humans discussing something called Project Lighthouse. The first voice belonged to someone identified as Dr. Alex Parker, apparently a scientist working on advanced technology projects. The second voice was someone called Director Nancy Lopez, who seemed to be in charge of overall human strategics planning. "Dr. Parker," Director Lopez was saying, "what's the status of the observational data collection?" "Excellent progress, Director. We now have complete technological profiles for all major galactic species. Their weapons systems, their defensive capabilities, their faster-than-light drives, even their social and political structures. We've been watching them for 50 years, and they've shown us everything we need to know." "And the cooperation problem?" "Solved. The integration of advanced artificial intelligence with human social engineering has achieved something that no galactic species has ever managed: complete unity of purpose without the loss of individual creativity. Every human understands their role in the larger plan, but they're still free to innovate and explore within that framework. What about the potential for conflict? Director, based on our analysis, no current galactic military force could pose a meaningful threat to human space. Their technology is at least 200 years behind ours, and their tactical thinking is limited by assumptions about physics that we abandoned decades ago. If we wanted to conquer the galaxy, we could do it in less than a year." There was a pause in the transmission, and then Director Lopez asked the question that made everyone on the Cosmic Dawn's bridge stop breathing. "What about Phase 2 of the project?" Dr. Parker's response was calm and matter-of-fact. We're ready to begin the teaching phase. The question is not whether we have the capability to start sharing our knowledge with selected species. The question is whether the galaxy is ready to learn what we have to teach. And your assessment? Mixed. We've identified 17 species that show the necessary wisdom and restraint for careful introduction to advanced concepts. The others will need more time to develop the emotional and ethical maturity required to handle reality manipulation technology. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the cosmic dawn in complete silence. Captain Vextar looked at his crew and saw his own fear reflected in their faces. The humans were not just more advanced than anyone had imagined. They had spent 50 years analyzing galactic civilization and had concluded that most species were not mature enough to be trusted with advanced technology. Even more disturbing was the casual way Dr. Parker had mentioned that humans could conquer the galaxy if they chose to. This was not an empty boast from a military officer trying to sound impressive. This was a scientific assessment from someone who had access to complete intelligence about every major species in known space. "Captain," Kesani said quietly, "what do we do with this information?" Vextar was quiet for a long moment. The right thing to do would be to report everything they had learned to the Navigation Guild and let the galactic authorities decide how to respond. But he had a terrible feeling that if the galaxy learned about human capabilities and intentions, the result would be panic and possibly a preemptive strike that would end badly for everyone involved. "Sir," Velnoth said, "there's something else. The platforms have been tracking our position since we arrived in this area. I believe they know exactly who we are and where we came from." As if summoned by his words, the ship's communication system activated. A calm human voice began speaking in perfect standard galactic, but with the same strange accent they had heard from the warning buoy. "Zeltharian vessel Cosmic Dawn, this is Commander Greg Taylor of Human Space Defense. We are aware of your presence and your investigation of our territory. We would like to speak with your captain about a matter of mutual interest." Captain Vexitar realized that everything had just changed. The humans were not going to let them leave quietly with their intelligence. For better or worse, first contact was about to happen again. The story began 53 years ago when Captain Jake Morrison was having what he thought would be a normal day aboard the human exploration ship Federation's Pride. The ship was not very big compared to the massive vessels that other species used, and its technology was simple by galactic standards. Humans had only recently figured out how to travel faster than light, and their method was slow and used a lot of energy. Jake was a career military officer who had volunteered for the Deep Space Exploration Program because he wanted to see what was out there beyond Earth's solar system. He was tall and thin with graying hair, and he had the kind of calm personality that made him good at dealing with unexpected situations. He would need that calmness very soon. The Federation's Pride was 3 weeks into a routine mapping mission when the sensors picked up something that should not have been there. A group of ships was approaching from the direction of the galactic center, ships that were much larger and more advanced than anything humans had ever built. Jake ordered his crew to slow down and wait to see what these strangers wanted. The first contact with the Zeltharian fleet went smoothly enough. The aliens were polite and seemed genuinely interested in meeting a new species. Their ships were beautiful, covered in smooth curves and glowing lights that suggested technology far beyond anything humans possessed. The Zeltharian captain, whose name was something Jake could not pronounce, explained through their translation devices that they represented something called the Galactic Council. The Council, the captain explained, was an organization that included most of the intelligent species in the galaxy. They had laws and trade agreements and systems for keeping peace between different worlds. When a new species was discovered, the Council would offer them membership and help them learn how to be part of galactic civilization. Jake listened carefully to the offer. Humans would be given access to advanced technology that would improve their ships, their weapons, and their ability to travel between stars. They would be protected by galactic law and included in trade networks that would bring wealth to Earth. In return, humans would follow Council rules about which star systems they could colonize and what resources they could take from their own territory. The Zeltharian captain seemed surprised when Jake said he would need to talk to his government before accepting such an important offer. Most new species, the captain explained, were eager to join the galactic community as quickly as possible. The benefits were obvious, and the restrictions were reasonable. Jake sent a detailed report back to Earth using the fastest communication method humans had, which was still much slower than what the galactic species used. It would take weeks to get an answer, so the Zeltharian fleet agreed to wait in neutral space while the humans made their decision. During those weeks, something interesting happened. Human scientists began studying the Zeltharian ships from a distance, using sensors and telescopes to learn how their technology worked. What they discovered was that the alien ships used principles of physics that humans understood, but applied them in ways that human scientists had never considered. Dr. Ben Rodriguez, the chief engineer on the Federation's Pride, spent long hours studying the readings and making calculations. Ben was one of those rare people who could look at a complex problem and see solutions that nobody else had thought of. He had been born in Mexico but had moved to the United States to study engineering, and his family had always said he could fix anything if you gave him enough time to think about it. After 2 weeks of analysis, Ben came to Jake with an interesting observation. The Zeltharian faster-than-light drive worked by folding space in a way that created a shortcut between 2 points. The principle was sound, but the execution was inefficient. Ben thought that with some modifications, humans could build a drive that was not only faster, but used much less energy. "Captain," Ben said, "I think we've been approaching this problem wrong. These aliens have good technology, but they're thinking about space travel like it's a transportation problem. What if we think about it like a physics problem instead?" Jake was not a scientist, but he had learned to listen when smart people had ideas. "What do you mean?" "They're trying to move their ships through space quickly. But what if instead of moving the ship, we move the space around the ship? Instead of folding space to create a shortcut, what if we convince space that the ship is already where it wants to be?" The answer from Earth finally came 3 weeks later. Ambassador Lisa Carter, a former Air Force colonel who had become one of Earth's top diplomats, sent a message that was polite but firm. Humanity appreciated the Council's offer, but they preferred to develop their own technology and explore space at their own pace. They were interested in peaceful contact and trade, but they were not ready to accept restrictions on their expansion or development. The Zeltharian captain was confused by this response. Most species understood that joining the galactic community meant accepting certain limitations in exchange for protection and advanced technology. Species that tried to develop on their own usually ended up falling behind and eventually being absorbed by more advanced civilizations anyway. Jake explained that humans were grateful for the contact and hoped to maintain friendly relations, but they had always been a species that preferred to figure things out for themselves. This was how they had solved most of their problems on Earth, and they saw no reason to change that approach now. The Zeltharian fleet left peacefully, but they left behind monitoring stations that would keep track of human activity. This was standard procedure for species that refused Council membership. If humans became aggressive or developed dangerous technology, the Council would need to know about it. What the monitoring stations recorded over the next 5 years surprised everyone. Human expansion was rapid but peaceful. They colonized 17 star systems using ships that traveled faster than anything in the galactic fleet. When Council scientists tried to understand how human faster-than-light technology worked, they discovered that humans had somehow improved the basic principles in ways that should not have been possible. Dr. Ben Rodriguez, now the Chief Technology Officer for the entire human space program, explained it simply when asked. "We looked at the problem differently," he said. "Instead of trying to move through space, we convinced space to rearrange itself. It's really just a matter of improving the math a little." The galactic scientists who heard this explanation were deeply troubled. The math that Ben was talking about involved fundamental laws of physics that were supposed to be unchangeable. If humans had found ways to improve these laws, it suggested a level of understanding that went beyond anything known in the galaxy. The real concern came when reports started arriving about human colonies that seemed to violate basic principles of planetary development. Humans were terraforming worlds in months instead of centuries, creating artificial gravity fields that covered entire planets, and building cities that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that should not have been accessible. When the Galactic Council sent inspection teams to observe human colonies, they were politely but firmly turned away. Lisa Carter, now Earth's primary representative for galactic affairs, explained that humans preferred to keep their internal affairs private. They were not threatening anyone and were following all applicable galactic laws about territorial boundaries and resource usage. The problem was that no galactic laws had been written to cover what humans were doing because no one had ever imagined that such things were possible. The laws assumed that all species would develop technology in predictable ways and follow understood principles of physics and engineering. The breaking point came when the hegemony of Kalar, a military alliance that controlled several hundred star systems, decided that human technology was too dangerous to be left unregulated. If humans could manipulate basic physics, they might eventually become a threat to the established galactic order. Admiral Thekmore, the supreme commander of the Kalarian military, was a veteran of dozens of conflicts who had never lost a battle. He was confident that his fleet of 2,000 ships could easily defeat the small human fleet and force them to accept Council oversight. The war that followed would prove him very, very wrong. Captain Vexistar stared at the screen in front of him and felt his scales tighten with worry. The Zeltharian exploration vessel Cosmic Dawn had been traveling for 3 months now, moving away from the bright center of the galaxy toward the empty darkness at the edge. His job was simple: map new star systems and look for planets that might be useful for trade or mining. It was boring work most of the time, but it paid well and kept him busy. The thing that worried him was not what he could see on the screen, but what he could not see. Every star chart in the galaxy showed the same thing in this area: a big empty space with warning symbols all around it. No details, no explanations, just red marks that told ships to stay away. The official name for this area was Quarantine Zone, Species 347, but nobody ever talked about what that meant. "Captain, you need to look at this," said Navigator Third Class Kasani from her station near the back of the bridge. She was young for a navigator, only 20 cycles old, and still curious about things that older crew members had learned not to ask about. Her green skin was darker than most Zeltharians, and her large eyes always seemed to be looking for something new to discover. Vextar walked over to her station and looked at the readings she was pointing to. The long-range sensors had picked up something big floating in space ahead of them. It was not a natural object like an asteroid or a broken piece of rock. The computer said it was made of metal and other materials that did not belong in empty space. "What do you think it is?" Kesani asked. "Trouble," Vexatar said quietly. He had been a ship captain for 40 cycles, long enough to know that finding unexpected objects in restricted space usually meant bad news. "Bring us closer, but keep the engines ready to run." As the cosmic dawn moved forward, the object became clearer on their screens. It was huge, bigger than their entire ship, and shaped like a long cylinder with blinking lights all around it. Strange symbols covered its surface, written in languages that their computer could not identify. At the top of the object, bright red lights flashed in a pattern that clearly meant warning in any language. "It's a buoy," said Chief Science Officer Vel Noth, a thin Zeltharian with pale blue skin who rarely spoke unless he was very sure about something. "A warning buoy, but not like any I have seen before. The materials are not from any known species in our database." Kessiani checked her instruments again and made a surprised noise. "Captain, there are more of them. Lots more. The sensors show at least 50 similar objects spread out in a line that goes on for thousands of kilometers. They form a barrier around this whole area of space." Vextar felt his worry growing stronger. Warning buoys were common enough around dangerous areas like black holes or unstable stars, but this was different. These buoys were not warning ships away from a natural danger. They were warning ships away from something else, something that someone had decided was too dangerous for the rest of the galaxy to know about. "Can you read any of the symbols on the buoy?" he asked Vel Noth. The science officer worked at his station for several minutes, running the strange symbols through every language database they had. "Some of them match old languages that are not used anymore," he said finally. "Others are completely unknown. But there is something strange here, Captain. The computer says these symbols represent at least 3,000 different languages." 3,000? Kessani repeated. "That's impossible. There are only about 800 known languages in the entire galaxy." "That's what makes it strange," Velnoth agreed. "Whoever built these buoys wanted to make sure that any species that found them would be able to read the warning, even species that might not exist anymore or might not have been discovered yet." Vextar stared at the buoy on the screen and tried to understand what he was seeing. In all his years of space travel, he had never heard of anyone building warning systems for languages that did not exist. It was like preparing for visitors who might never come, or might come from places that nobody knew about. "Sir," Kessani said, and her voice was quieter now. "I think I found something else. Look at these readings." She pointed to her navigation screen, where a set of numbers was slowly changing. The numbers showed the buoy's position in space, but they were not staying the same like they should for an object that was just floating freely. "The buoy is moving," she said. "Not drifting with gravity or solar wind like a normal object would. It's moving on purpose, following a set pattern like it's patrolling this area." "Patrolling?" Vextar asked. "You mean it's alive?" "Not alive exactly, but controlled by something. It's following a path that takes it back and forth along this section of the barrier, like a guard walking back and forth in front of a door." Velnoth made some adjustments to his instruments and nodded. "She's right, Captain. The buoy has its own power source and propulsion system. It's definitely not just floating here. Someone put it here to actively guard this area." The three of them stood quietly for a moment, thinking about what this meant. Warning buoys were one thing, but moving patrol buoys were something completely different. They suggested that whatever was behind the barrier was not just dangerous but actively protected by someone who did not want visitors. "Captain," Kesani said suddenly, "we're receiving a transmission." From where? From the buoy itself. Vexatar felt his blood go cold. In 40 cycles of space travel, he had never heard of a warning buoy that could send messages. "Put it on the main speakers." The bridge filled with a strange crackling sound, and then a voice began to speak. It was a calm voice, neither male nor female, speaking in perfect standard galactic. But there was something odd about the accent, something that made it sound like the speaker had learned the language from books instead of growing up with it. "This is the edge of human space," the voice said. "Turn back now. This is your only warning." The message repeated in several other languages that Vextar recognized, and then continued in many more that he did not. Each time the words were the same. "Turn back. This is your only warning." When the message finished, the bridge was completely silent. Vexatar looked at his crew and saw his own fear reflected in their faces. Human space. He had heard that name before, whispered in quiet conversations between navigators who had been working long enough to remember things that were not supposed to be talked about. "Set course away from here," he said finally. "Maximum speed." "Captain," Kesani said, "shouldn't we report this to the Navigation Guild? They'll want to know about the moving buoys and the transmission." Vextar was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked back to his captain's chair and sat down heavily. "Kesani, how old are you?" 20 cycles, sir." "Then you're too young to remember the stories. But every navigator who's been working for more than 30 cycles knows about the expedition that came to this area 50 years ago. 12 ships went in to investigate the Silent Zone. Only one came back." He paused and looked at the buoy on the screen, still blinking its warning lights in the darkness. The crew of that ship spent 6 months in a medical facility before they could even speak normally again. When they finally could talk, they all said the same thing. They turned physics into a weapon. The Navigation Guild classified the whole report and made this area officially off-limits. Kesani stared at him. "What do you think they meant?" "I don't know," Vextar said, "and I don't want to find out." 6 months after first contact, the galaxy looked completely different. The war that everyone expected to last years had ended in just 3 weeks. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the Leviathan, watching human ships patrol what used to be Confederation space, and reflected on how quickly everything had changed. The Confederation War had not been the massive fleet engagement that military historians would have preferred to study. Instead, it had been a series of surgical strikes that crippled alien infrastructure while avoiding unnecessary casualties. Human ships had appeared without warning at key communication hubs, manufacturing centers, and command facilities throughout Confederation space. The aliens had tried to fight back, but their weapons could not penetrate human shields, and their ships could not catch human vessels. After the first week, most Confederation fleets had simply surrendered rather than face annihilation. The few species that kept fighting learned that humanity's mercy had limits. Captain Ben Harris commanded the newest ship in the human star Navy, the UES Sovereign, as it escorted a convoy of colonists to the former Confederation world of New Harmony. The planet had voted to join the Terran Republic after their previous government fled during the war. Now human families were arriving to build new homes under alien suns. The transition had not been entirely peaceful. Some former Confederation species still refused to accept the new galactic order. The Cronin Empire had tried to establish an independent military alliance, only to discover that their neighbors were more afraid of human retaliation than Cronin threats. Admiral Paul Stevens and the UES Titan had dealt with the Cronin problem efficiently. A single demonstration of human firepower had convinced the reptilian warriors that their empire's glory days were over. The Cronins were now junior partners in a defense pact that they did not dare break. Ambassador Susan Clark worked from her office on the space station that had replaced the old Confederation capital. As humanity's first galactic diplomat, she spent her days negotiating with species that still could not believe how quickly their world had changed. The Zephyrian Republic, led by the pragmatic Admiral Veltar Quinn, had been among the first to make peace with humanity. Quinn had realized that opposing Earth was suicide, and his people had chosen survival over pride. The former ambassador was now a respected military advisor, helping other species understand the new rules of galactic politics. The humans are not conquerors in the traditional sense, Quinn explained to a gathering of nervous alien leaders. They do not seek to enslave other species or strip worlds of their resources, but they also will not tolerate challenges to their expansion or threats to their people. Dr. Foster's research teams had established laboratories throughout former Confederation space, studying alien technology and biology while sharing human advances with cooperative species. The exchange of knowledge was voluntary, but few civilizations could resist the offer of fusion power, advanced medical techniques, and defensive systems that actually worked. The Hevan Commercial Alliance had been the easiest to integrate into the new order. As natural traders, they understood that human technology and protection were valuable commodities. Hivan merchants now carried human goods throughout the galaxy, spreading Earth's influence through commerce rather than conquest. On the bridge of the Leviathan, Carter reviewed reports from across human space. The expansion was proceeding faster than anyone had expected. Dozens of former Confederation worlds had requested protection from the Terran Republic. Others had simply declared independence and asked for human recognition of their sovereignty. Admiral, Commander Torres reported, "We are receiving a request for assistance from the Outer Rim. Pirates have been attacking trade convoys, and the local defense forces cannot stop them." Carter nodded. "Send the Defiance. Captain White knows how to handle pirates." The piracy problem was one of the unexpected consequences of the Confederation's collapse. Without central authority to maintain order, some systems had descended into chaos. Humanity was gradually extending protection to these areas, but it was a slow process. Chief Engineer Pete Collins had been promoted to head the new technical exchange program, teaching alien engineers how to maintain and operate human-designed equipment. His biggest challenge was convincing them that the technology was real, not some kind of elaborate trick. "The fusion reactors work exactly like I tell you they work," Collins explained to a group of bewildered Aldari technicians. "Just because you do not understand the physics does not mean the physics are wrong." The Aldari had become humanity's closest allies, their natural curiosity making them eager students of human science. Their home world was now the site of the galaxy's largest combined human-alien research facility, where scientists from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under Confederation rule. Communications Officer Nancy Brooks had been transferred to Earth Command, where she monitored the flow of information throughout human space. Her job was to watch for signs of rebellion or external threats, but most of her time was spent managing requests for aid and protection. "Sir," Brooks reported to President Johnson during their weekly briefing, "we have received formal applications for Terran Republic membership from 6 more systems. All of them are former Confederation worlds that want human protection. Johnson studied the star charts that showed humanity's expanding influence. In 6 months, Earth had gone from an isolated system to the dominant power in this region of the galaxy. The responsibility was overwhelming, but the alternatives had been worse. The few species that still opposed human expansion had learned to be very careful about how they expressed their feelings. The Velcarin Consortium had tried to organize economic sanctions against human trade, only to discover that their own people preferred human goods to locally manufactured products. Admiral Carter received a priority message from deep space sensors as the Leviathan prepared for its next mission. Long-range scanners had detected signs of activity in the galactic core, where ancient civilizations were said to have built technologies that made even human achievements look primitive. Admiral, Dr. Foster reported, the signals are definitely artificial. Something big is happening near the galactic center, and it might be responding to our expansion. Carter was not surprised. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had only explored a tiny fraction of it. There were bound to be other powers. Out there, civilizations that made the old Confederation look like children playing with toys. But Carter was not worried. Humanity had already proven that determination and superior technology could overcome any numerical disadvantage. If there were older, more advanced species waiting in the galactic core, Earth would meet them as equals rather than supplicants. The Leviathan and a fleet of exploration vessels departed for the unknown regions beyond former Confederation space. Their mission was to map new territories, contact previously unknown species, and establish humanity's presence in the wider galaxy. Behind them, the former Confederation worlds continued their transformation under human influence. Some species adapted quickly to the new order, embracing the opportunities that came with human protection and technology. Others retreated to their home systems, hoping to avoid notice until the storm passed. But the storm was not passing. The dreadnought, that had ended negotiations 6 months ago, had become the symbol of a new galactic age. Humanity had announced its presence not with words but with weapons, and the galaxy had learned to listen when Earth spoke. Captain Helen White stood on the bridge of the Defiance as her ship approached the pirate stronghold in the Outer Rim. The raiders had been terrorizing merchant convoys for months, thinking that the collapse of Confederation authority meant they could operate without consequences. They were about to learn that humanity took a very dim view of attacks on civilian shipping. The Defiance's weapons were already locked onto the pirate base, and White's orders were simple: surrender or be destroyed. This is Captain White of the Terran Republic ship Defiance. She broadcast to the pirate station. You have 60 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. The pirates tried to run, but their ships were no match for human technology. Within an hour, the threat was eliminated, and the surviving raiders were in custody. Word of the action would spread quickly through the Outer Rim, reminding everyone that human protection came with human justice. Admiral Carter looked out at the stars ahead of the Leviathan and wondered what new challenges awaited humanity in the galactic core. Ancient powers, hostile empires, or perhaps civilizations that would welcome Earth as an equal rather than fear it as a threat. Whatever they found, humanity would meet it with the same determination that had brought them this far. The dreadnought's legacy was not fear or conquest, but the simple message that Earth's children would bow to no one and would claim their place among the stars through strength, courage, and an absolute refusal to accept limitations imposed by others. The galaxy belonged to whoever was strong enough to claim it and wise enough to keep it. Humanity had proven they were strong enough, and they were learning wisdom through experience. The future stretched out before them like an infinite sea of possibilities, and they were ready to explore it all.